Have you ever noticed how some stories just show up everywhere? I'm talking about ancient cultures separated by huge oceans, by thousands of years, that somehow, against all odds, tell the exact same impossible story. The story of a great flood that wiped the world clean. It's a puzzle that's kept people guessing for centuries. Is it all just a massive coincidence? Some kind of shared nightmare that's baked into our DNA? Or is it something else entirely? We're going to dive deep into that mystery, because the answer, well, it might just be a thread that connects every single one of us to a single catastrophic day in our deepest past. I mean, you know the big ones, right? The Bible gives us Noah building an ark because God gave him a heads up. The Quran tells a very similar story about Nuh, who was saved from the deluge. But okay, let's rewind the clock even further. 1,000 years before the Bible was written to ancient Sumeria, you've got the Epic of Gilgamesh, which describes this global flood sent by angry gods. Now jump clear across the planet to the Americas, the Mayan Popol Vuh, Aztec traditions. They also talk about a sky that just collapsed in water that wiped out a whole version of humanity. These aren't just kind of similar stories. They share the same bones, the same DNA. It's almost spooky. Okay, and this is where the mystery goes from just spooky to, well, seemingly impossible. On one side, you've got a Sumerian cuneiform tablet from Mesopotamia. On the other, a Mayan carving from Central America. Let's be super clear here. These two civilizations had absolutely zero contact. None. They were separated by impossible distances, thousands of years of history. They didn't share a language, they didn't trade, they weren't related. And yet, they both carved the exact same fundamental memory into their most sacred records. So how on earth is that possible?
And we're not just talking about a handful of examples here. This is a truly global phenomenon. Researchers have actually cataloged over 500 distinct flood myths from every single inhabited continent. From the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories in Australia all the way to the Norse sagas in Scandinavia, the same theme pops up again and again. The sheer overwhelming number of these stories forces you to ask a really big question. This can't just be a collection of local tales about a river overflowing. This sounds like one story, told in 500 different languages, about the entire world drowning.
So that brings us right to the heart of it. Did all of our ancestors all over the planet just happen to dream up the exact same terrifying nightmare? Was it just some kind of collective hallucination? Or is there another, much more mind-blowing possibility? That the Great Flood isn't a myth at all. That it's a memory, a surviving memory of a real physical event, a global trauma so huge it was seared into the minds of its survivors and just never forgotten. To figure that out, we have to switch gears, leave the world of mythology behind, and follow the clues into the world of science. For the longest time, science just kind of wrote this all off as a metaphor, a simple story about morality. But then, buried deep in ice cores from Antarctica, hidden in sediment layers on the ocean floor, geologists found something that changed absolutely everything. They found cold, hard, physical proof of a time when the oceans literally rose with terrifying speed. And we can now pinpoint this event with incredible accuracy. Our story starts 12,800 years ago. We're at the very end of the last ice age, in a period called the Younger Dryas. And this was a time of incredibly violent and extreme climate instability. This wasn't some gentle planetary spring thaw. No, this was a cataclysm.
So get that picture of a slow, gradual melt happening over centuries out of your head. That is not what the geological record shows. It shows something way more terrifying. In what was basically the blink of a geological eye, global temperatures spiked. Hard. Now, scientists are still debating what pulled the trigger. Some point to massive solar flares, others to a comet breaking up and hitting the Earth, but the result is undeniable. The enormous ice sheets that covered huge chunks of the northern hemisphere didn't just melt around the edges. They destabilized and shattered on a colossal scale.
Scientists have a name for this. They call it Meltwater Pulse 1b. Yeah, I know, it sounds pretty sterile, almost boring, right? But what that term is describing is pure, unadulterated, planetary chaos. It was a period of unbelievably rapid sea level rise as trillions and trillions of tons of fresh water from those collapsing glaciers got dumped almost instantly straight into the world's oceans. Just try to get your head around the cause here. Picture glaciers that were 2 miles high. That is twice the height of the world's tallest skyscraper, covering entire continents like North America and Europe. Now imagine those continent-sized walls of ice just cracking, groaning, and then collapsing into the ocean.
the energy released would have been almost unimaginable. It would have triggered earthquakes that shook the whole planet and created mega tsunamis that just raced across the seas.
And the consequence of all that melt? A wall of water. The oceans of the world didn't creep up by inches over a lifetime. No, they shot up by feet, maybe even tens of feet, in a matter of days or weeks. The total rise was catastrophic. If you were living anywhere near the coast back then, you wouldn't be watching a rising tide. You'd be watching the horizon itself turn into a dark mountain of water coming right at you.
You have to try and put yourself in their shoes. They had no concept of geology or climate cycles. From where they stood, the sky was falling, the oceans were boiling over, and the entire world was being literally unmade, probably by angry, vengeful gods. For them, it was an environmental event. It was a divine judgment. It was, for all intents and purposes, the end of their world.
So if the water rose that fast and that high, a really terrifying question pops up. What, or maybe who, got lost beneath the waves? And this is where we go from geology into maybe the most fascinating part of this mystery, the search for a drowned civilization. You know, our standard picture of humans 12,000 years ago is of these small, scattered bands of primitive hunter-gatherers, right? But what if that whole picture is just wrong? What if it's incomplete because the most advanced parts of their world were in the exact place the floodwaters would have hit the hardest, those fertile, resource-rich coastlines? What if the flood didn't just end an ice age? What if it erased an entire chapter of the human story? For the longest time, that idea was just pure speculation. And then, high up on a Turkish mountaintop, archaeologists found a site that completely rewrote our history books, Göbekli Tepe. This thing is a huge, sophisticated complex of stone temples, built with incredible precision. And here's the kicker. It's dated to over 11,500 years ago. That's before the Great Melt, at a time when we thought people were just living in simple huts. I mean, the stuff they found at Göbekli Tepe is just stunning. We're talking massive T-shaped pillars that weigh tons, that were quarried and moved with what must have been some kind of advanced engineering. There are these intricate carvings of animals and symbols. It suggests a really complex system of belief. This was not the work of simple hunter-gatherers. This was the work of an organized, sophisticated culture. And you have to ask, if they could build this on a remote mountaintop, what could they have been building on the much more hospitable and now underwater coastlines? 400 feet, that is the number scientists agree on for the total sea level rise since the end of the last ice age. Just let that sink in. 400 feet. That's enough to swallow up an area of land worldwide the size of Europe and China combined. A vast territory where humanity's first great coastal communities could have thrived. All of it now lost to us, under the waves. And so, suddenly, the idea of a lost city like Atlantis stops sounding like pure fantasy and starts looking a lot more like a scientific probability. Maybe not one single magical city ruled by demigods, but a whole world of coastal civilizations. Their towns, their innovations, their entire history, just wiped clean from the map and buried beneath the sea, waiting for us to find it. So the floodwaters didn't just wash away stone and buildings. They completely erased the official record of a lost world. The only thing left to carry the story forward were the refugees, right? The traumatized survivors who managed to scramble to high ground. And this is how a real geological event starts its long, slow journey into becoming a timeless myth. See, these survivors didn't have writing to record what happened. All they had were their voices and their memories. Just imagine them, huddled around fires on these brand new shorelines, looking out over a world that had been completely remade by water. They told their children what they saw. It would have been a story of survival, of unimaginable loss, and a desperate warning for the future. And as generations came and went, the story was told and retold again. Over thousands of years, as humanity spread back out and repopulated the world, the details changed to fit new cultures, new languages. The hero in Sumeria was a guy named Utnapishtim. For the Hebrews, he became Noah. For the ancient Greeks, he was Deucalion. In India, Manu. The names of the heroes and the gods changed, but the core of the story, that traumatic memory of the water, it stayed perfectly, stubbornly intact. Which brings us to the story's big lesson, the Ark. It wasn't necessarily one literal boat filled with animals. It became this powerful universal symbol. It represents foresight and wisdom and the will to survive when the odds are impossible. It's a story about the few who actually listened to the warnings the Earth was giving them, who saw the signs that everyone else ignored, and who prepared for the disaster while the world around them just carried on, completely oblivious.
So, what does this ancient memory mean for us today? Because this story doesn't just end in the distant past. You can think of it like a message in a bottle, carried across thousands of years on a current of water and time, and it's arrived right on our modern doorstep. And this, for me, leads to the most incredible realization of all. Your existence, my existence, it's not an accident. Every single person alive on this planet today is a direct descendant of the people who survived that cataclysm. We are all the children of those who ran fast enough, who climbed high enough, or who were just wise enough to listen to the warning. That trauma and that incredible resilience is literally encoded in our shared human story. So in the end, the Great Flood isn't just a fairy tale. It's more like a scar on our collective human memory. It's a warning passed down from the last time our species came face to face with a truly global climate catastrophe. And as we sit here today and watch our own ice caps melt and our own sea levels begin to rise, the question that ancient myth asks us is pretty chilling. Are we paying attention to the signs this time? Are we listening to the echoes of that ancient warning? Or are we too doomed to repeat a history that we've told ourselves for so long is just a myth?